Hello and welcome to Warblog. Today I'm going back through some of the older games, and this one is the Burkina Faso Coup, so to speak. Let's see what it actually says. Look this up quickly. I should maybe change some of these words actually so they're a little more timeful, but I'm sure it's a coup, essentially. Government toops approached the city. Basically a coup. He always makes me laugh. It's like this suit's too big for him. Burkina Faso coup leader ready to hand over power. So basically he led a coup. Whereabouts of the coup leader, General Gilbert Diendé, are unknown. I wonder what happened to him. This is a couple of years ago, but he basically had a Regiment of Presidential Security, and against all these other units. Now, there are actually special forces, and they're actually pretty tough, and I am sort of wondering whether or not they could beat all these other units. But that's not what this is all about. Not sure about the military setup, but it sounds sort of right. Had to guess at the size and number of units, but it can't be too far off. Really useful words. In short, the Regiment of Presidential Security doesn't stand a chance. In theory, they're special forces, which is what war is about, really. I guess. I think they have already surrendered. Even before I prepared this. But the idea is that you can visualize this scenario as well as play it through. I think the first move of the Regiment of Presidential Security would be to surrender. There should be victory settings for surrendering on the first turn and penalties for fighting to the death. I also added some protestors, as there appear to be a few, and they have been advised to stay clear as the government troops approach the city. It doesn't actually say what it was, but it's basically a coup. Yeah, the Burkinabe Coup Detat, launched on the 16th of September, when members of the Regiment of Presidential Security, a controversial autonomous military unit, a bit like me, formed under President Blaise Compaoré, detained the country's government. They detained the country's government. We need that in England. An autonomous military unit in the United Kingdom to detain the country's government. Among those detained were the transitional president Michel Kafando, Prime Minister Yakuba Isaac Zida, who was also the former deputy commander of the RSP, etc., etc., etc. So there's a lot really of writing. 11 people died and more than 250 were injured during the coup. In the first cabinet meeting afterwards, held on 25th September, the Minister of Security was dismissed and the position of heads of the President's Military Council was abolished. A commission was created to identify those involved in the coup and given 30 days to report. Prosecutions are expected to be made. So presumably that's not really been updated. Anyway, I'm not here to read the Wikipedia. You can read that if you want. I'm here to play the game. So that I can put a video on the page. So basically, I need to put a video, and the video will go in there, and it will just be this. This is the video. But I'm going through all the games. So essentially, there we have our, what do we call it? Coup Detat, detaining the government with protesters around. So presumably the protesters supported the government, but the autonomous military unit didn't. And so we have a lot of other units around. Now, as I said, sort of in half in jest, the first move would be to surrender, really. But what I'm not going to do is start attacking and sort of seeing what could be done. I mean, you could do that if you want. You could play this game and you could see whether you could win against any of these other units. And the reason I say that is because they've got a good defence, and in whatever that is, which looks like dense urban, which I think is ×3, it'd be quite tough. And they attack ×3 against anything that's less than 5, I think. And most of these units look to be less than 5, so they would be attacking at 18. So they're like a small army in their own right. So you could, in theory, do something like that. So their first turn is to not do anything, because presumably they're hoping that the rest of the country will follow them. The rest of the military, etc., etc. So we'll go on to the government turn, and their troops will slowly approach. Okay. Tanks. Motorized infantry. Mechanized infantry. Sorry. Okay. So they're slowly approaching the city. The Presidential Guard, Regiment of Presidential Security, are again going to sit there. I mean, it's a game, obviously, but there's not much to it in the sense that you can't really do anything. And I'm just wondering what they were expecting, really. I think they were sort of expecting, some negotiation. Perhaps that was what their hand was in negotiating, etc., etc. Oh look, a bit of the road doesn't work. It's interesting. I'll have to fix that. So that's their turn. Look at that. Fly along the roads. So, before you know it, the city is surrounded by government troops. And so, I think now, the Regiment of Presidential Security is going to surrender. And that's it. Game over. I think that's quite an interesting scenario. I think you've got to sort of look into things a little deeper from a general perspective, and trying to figure out what they were trying to achieve and what could possibly have happened. What were the variations on that? I mean, was it possible that other units would have joined in? How far away were they from a civil war or something like that, or was it really something that never had any possibility to it at all? These African states, they always startle me in their readiness to have a coup or enter into a civil war. I think there was another one, the Gambia one, where the president wouldn't stand down. Again, I mean, a lot of these people don't respect anything other than force, and they use force. And I don't know what I'm getting to really. It seems that you could have parallel histories, some which are incredibly bloody, and then others like this, which, the units surrender, the presidential palace guards surrender, and it's all over, and you sort of think, well, that was lucky, looking at it from a humanistic perspective. They could have been quite bloody, as they often are. The only thing I would say, I think, in this modern age, I don't see. I think the situation is a lot different because of communications, not just television, but the internet and the readiness of communications. These things, suddenly become more open, or people are more aware. What I may be getting into. I mean, if this had happened, say, in the 70s or 80s, it could have been quite a while before it was actually even televised, before it was even made as news. These things could have happened and they weren't reported till 2 or 3 days later. I mean, it would depend whether you had reporters in the city, so maybe they would be quite quick. But with the internet, things are a lot different. People's opinions far and wide can count a lot quicker. And we're not talking about just the general public. Leaders and the whole world is a lot smaller and more switched on. And I think that plays a big part in reducing the likelihood of a situation like this boiling over, because it suddenly receives the global limelight far sooner, almost in real time, as it did many years ago. And this might not be necessarily as true from our perspective. Perhaps a better way to put it, or a better angle to look at it from, would be the perspective of the actual people of the country. I mean, for example, in the Eritrea-Ethiopia conflict, it was noted that quite often people didn't actually know what was happening on the front line. They didn't know, and they were being told a lot of lies, and they were being told that they were winning. Major losses weren't being told, and people were hearing from them sort of second hand as people fled. They were told, these places, they're still in control, even though the people are fleeing from 10 miles down the road, saying that the Eritreans are coming, and that was the only way people found out. So, what I'm saying is, now there's not as much chance. I mean, the people in Kupelo or Mango or Zorgo or Boromo will probably be able to figure it out quite a lot sooner. Not because they're all switched on to social media, but because some of them would be using the internet in one form or another. Mobile telephones, all that sort of stuff, and word of mouth from there, as well as just general communication systems, would mean that a lot more people would be aware, and their I don't want to say their voices, I don't want to sound like mainstream media, but it would change the general feel throughout the country about what was happening. So to some extent you could almost things speed up a lot quicker, I think. For example, the Regiment of Presidential Security would possibly have known a lot sooner whether or not they had the support of the people than before, when there were no communications and they were completely blind to the opinion of the country and to other forces. But I mean, in this one, they pretty much know the mood and the feeling of the country, because the government troops are still government troops, and they're not on their side. So I don't know. I think sometimes these coups, they happen. They're trying for pot luck. They say, "Well, here we are. We're having a coup. Who's following me?" And if everyone follows them, fantastic. They're the coup leaders and they're instant millionaires because they lead the country. But if it doesn't, then they lose. And they don't really bother with the fighting bit, because it's like a lottery scratch card, possibly, to them. And they give it a whirl and see what happens, and possibly pay with their lives. But anyway, so there's my video now. Hope you enjoy it. I'll speak to you later. Cheers, bye.